Hello, bookish friends. Welcome back. This week, I wanted to kind of go back in time a little bit and show you some of the books that I've bought that were some of my favorites, like when I was like a middle grade reader. A couple of them are like my old copies, but a lot of them are like books that I've seen like at bookstores or like used bookstores that kind of like remind me of like when I was younger and stood out to me as like books that like I read like a bunch of times and wanted to have as like an adult on my shelf as kind of like foundational like aspects of like my own reading. So yeah, I mean, like as a kid, I was an avid reader. Reading was definitely like celebrated in the household. And so like we all read and we all read sometimes like together. But I was reading a lot of like kind of like older classics like as a kid. But I just wanted to go through this list because I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it would be like kind of a fun thing to do. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's fun for you as well. Taking you down memory lane. Okay, so to start off this list, I'll start with my prettiest book, which is a collector's edition of Tuck Everlasting. I love this book, and I feel like I am not a huge fan of like, I'm gonna call it time travel, even though it's not, but like where one character like doesn't age. I feel like it's just like a really hard thing to pull off. And I feel like Tuck Everlasting is such like a bittersweet book. And it's probably one of the first books that I read where like I wasn't amused by the ending, but also I could understand like why it was the way it was, and it made me like I still liked it even though it wasn't like quote like a happy ending or like a completely tied up ending. So yes, I was really excited to get this book, which doesn't even have like the title on the front. It's very like notebooky. And it's illustrated, so it has like little pictures in it. This is a book that I really liked as a kid. And when I saw this copy, I was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Must buy. So I did. But yes, so Tuck Everlasting was one of the ones I remember reading probably in like middle school. So, you know, I was like a 5th grader or 6th grader or something and like really loved it. And my sister is like on me like literally all the time because I've actually never seen like the Disney movie of this. And it's one of like her favorite movies. Next, these definitely skew like a little bit younger. And I had the third one, but at some point I ended up losing it. Like maybe I gave it to someone to like read and like didn't collect it back or something along those lines. But these are the Clarice Bean books, which I loved as a kid like so much. And so I never got rid of them. So these are the original, slightly water destroyed copies that I've had like since a really long time. And I feel like the way that they're printed is also like very characteristic of like a bunch of books at that time period, with like the kind of like laminated cover and like really thick pages. But yeah, I feel like this book is kind of like it's a little bit older than Junie B. Jones, but not quite like the age of like Judy Moody or like Ramona and like Beezus. So I feel like they're kind of like in between those, and a little bit more flashy. Like Clarice Bean, she's kind of like a little bit of a diva. She has this like fictional spy that she like wishes she was like Ruby Redford. She reads like this huge series that's kind of like Nancy Drew, I guess. And so those chapters are like interspersed. She's like an older sister. So she has like a couple of younger siblings that like are part of the book as well. I actually don't really remember too much about each of the plots of these books, but I love them. And I read them many times, and I read them aloud many times as well, which was like something else I also did like as a kid. I would like read to my younger siblings. But yeah, they're very fun. They have like, you know, different sized words, kind of like Geronimo Stilton did as well, which I also read around this time period. But yeah, loved these. Thought they were like literally so cute. Okay, next I have The Tale of Despereaux, which also was like a really a book that I read a lot as well. I definitely at least read it like 3 times. But this one won the John Newbery Medal. It was also made into a movie featuring Emma Watson as the Princess P, which I feel like was also instrumental in me really liking the book as well. And this one is basically just like a mouse who has like huge ears. And so he kind of like sticks out and everyone thinks that, you know, he doesn't really fit in. He really wants to be a knight. But it's a very cute book. And now talking about all these books just makes me want to read them again. Because I'm realizing I don't really remember the finer points of them. But yes, when I read it, this is not the version that I read. I read like it was like a hardcover and it had those like raw edged pages or whatever. And it felt like really big. And so I was like, you know, reading this mammoth of a book about the little mouse. But yes, I really liked this one and would recommend it. Another middle grader book. Okay, next I have My Side of the Mountain, which I picked up from like a used bookstore when I saw it. It's actually in like pretty good shape too. Although the pages are like quite yellowed, which I also kind of like. This book I never actually owned as a kid. I read it probably like 5 or 6 times from one of my teachers had like a personal copy that they brought in and like would let people like borrow if they were reading it. And I literally just like lived with it at my house, like consistently reading it essentially until I like finished her class and I didn't have the book anymore. So I think I read it. It was probably like 6th grade. And I'm trying to think of like which teacher it was. And I feel like 6th grade like makes sense as being like the right time period and the correct teacher who I think would have had this in her collection. So this book it's very nerdy, honestly, but it's about this little kid who is like 16 maybe. You know, it's probably takes place in like the 50s or something. So it's not like so weird, but basically he tells his family that he's going to run away. And then he like actually does run away and he goes off and lives in like the Catskill Mountains. And he did like a little bit of research beforehand, but, you know, basically he just, you know, lives on his own. He sets up some snares. You know, in the beginning, he's definitely like a little bit more rough. Like, you know, it takes him a while to kind of like set up his life. But yeah, he eventually like catches like a little baby falcon and he teaches it to like, he trains it so that it can hunt for him, whose name is Frightful. And then like there are other books as well. So it's the first one is My Side of the Mountain, and then there's like the other side of the mountain when he like starts to go exploring, and then there's Frightful's Mountain, which I think was when like Frightful like gets lost or something, and is like trying to make her way back to him almost. But yeah, it's very strange. But also I really liked it, and it's full of like little it's almost like a little field journal. But yeah, I really liked this. It kind of reminds me of like the Swiss Family Robinson, like a little bit, where like they're trying to like, you know, invent like modern stuff. And then they tell you about all of the cool inventions that they're making. And, you know, you can look at like how smart they are and how you would never be able to do such a thing. Okay, next I have The Giver, which was one of the first books I read for school that I really, really liked. I was always doing like a bunch of like summer reading and like reading for school. And a lot of times like the books they had us read were like really sad and like depressing and not necessarily books I would have picked up on my own. I was like not super into historical fiction like as a kid. And for some reason it was just like the only thing that like we would ever read like related to school. So when we read The Giver, like I was really excited because it's, you know, more dystopian and you know, it you're kind of like unpacking the mystery of like some crazy society and like what it means. And it seems similar to like how we're living now, but like there are some distinct differences and, you know, like considering like why people would have necessarily made those choices when they're setting up this dystopian society. I feel like dystopian novels were also like hugely popular like as I got older. Like when I was, you know, in 7th and 8th and 9th grade, 10th grade, like I feel like it was very much like the Hunger Games were like gigantic, and then there was like Divergent and all this stuff. So I feel like the dystopian novel being covered in school, and I know a ton of people who read this like for school around this time period. I don't know, maybe it was a connection. But I feel like it was one of the first books where we were talking about the choices that the author made as opposed to just like the historical stuff that was covered in the book. Because I feel like because we were reading so much historical fiction like prior to this, reading this book in general, a lot of the conversation was just about the history and not necessarily about the book itself. Whereas like this book, when we talked about it, we were talking about like what was going on in the society and like why the author was, like choosing to uncover it in this specific way. And, like what a society would look like if these things had been true. I don't know. It was in like 7th grade probably when we read it, but yeah, it definitely stood out. They sent it home with us and I read it all like the first day. Because I like couldn't put it down, which was definitely like not ideal for when they wanted you to like go back and do like minute reading quizzes like every day. Just because like there was no way I was remembering like small details from like very specific chapters like when I went back. So don't advise that as a theory. Next, I have a book that is my original copy, and man, is this thing in rough shape. Okay. This book is Princess Academy by Shannon Hale, who is, I would say, like one of my favorite authors, and definitely one of my favorite authors, like when I was a kid. I read legitimately everything this woman wrote. Just because I was like so obsessed. And I think that one of the other, I don't know, disclaimer, I've only read this book. And I think now there's 3. I think there's 3 books now, and this like, what has become a series. And I've only read the first one. And I don't honestly know if I will ever read the other ones because I just loved this one so much that I just like, there's no need for me to read anymore. But basically this is, it's like a fantasy. This girl, Miri, lives in like a remote mountaintop like area where there's like a quarry. The situation is like not necessarily great for like the miners in the area. They're kind of poor. And they live far away from like the capital. But there is this tradition that happens where when the prince, I think, becomes of marrying age, they basically choose like one random town where the next princess will be like chosen from, essentially, as like a way to, reinvigorate the civilization or something, like make everyone feel involved. So they're going to have like a grand ball. And so they basically fly in a bunch of tutors, not fly in. They send in a bunch of tutors. They create like a makeshift school, and it's a finishing school like for people to learn how to become a princess. And they, teach them a bunch of stuff like how to dance, a bunch of like, a bunch of things just because, school is not the priority in a mining town, like where you live far away from like the capital, and there's not necessarily like huge need for advanced reading skills, etc. She doesn't know if she wants to be chosen because she's like, she thinks of it as kind of like a sellout, like why would she want to leave like her town where she like, has this small like romantic inkling toward like this childhood friend that she has, which is like my total kryptonite. And apparently has been for 15 years. It's no big deal. And yeah, now I want to read this again as well. So, but yes, The Princess Academy is like one of my ultimate favorite books. I read this so many times. The book is like falling apart at the front. I read it out loud in its entirety to like my sister. After I read her like the end, being like, this book is so amazing. Like, listen to the end. And then I was like, actually, I'll just read the whole thing to you. But yes, very, very good. And one of my ultimate favorite books, I would say, of all time. Okay. Next I have this one I actually just bought like pretty recently, from like a used bookstore. Also very like wonderful, lightly used copy of Caddy Woodlawn. And I did own this book, but I feel like it definitely got like water damaged because it was another book that I read like a ton as a kid and was like taking with me places, and it was only paperback, and it was like not up to the task of like going on vacation and like getting left outside potentially. And so I'm pretty sure I don't even know if it got donated. I think it was like probably gotten rid of. But this one is it's not the exact copy that I had. The cover is not the same, but the illustrations are the same. So it has like small illustrations throughout the book. And these are like the illustrations that I do remember. But this is kind of like a prairie-ish story. So I guess like similar to Little House on the Prairie like books. And it's definitely like the same time period. But Caddy Woodlawn is basically like a tomboy character who's growing up in like kind of like a rural area. And, her mother like kind of wants her to, like become like a lady. And she's like, no, like I'd much rather like be outside and, being outside with my brothers and like being competitive. And I don't know. I feel like I don't really remember too much about it. But it covers like quite a few years of her life too. So it's like definitely like a coming of age story. So, and the winner of the John Newbery Medal as well. So we got a few of these for sure. So, but yeah, I remember like really liking this book and reading a lot. So I wanted to own it. Okay. Next, I feel like I would be remiss to not include like Harry Potter like in this list. Just because I read this like in middle school. We definitely waited like a long time to read these, like as a family, I would say, which was nice just because like all the books like already existed when we started reading them, and we just like kind of blew through all of them. And it was nice like not having to wait necessarily, but like I was much older than Harry was like when I first started reading the books. But yeah, I recently just got the last 2 copies of these at like a used bookstore. I was like passing by and they had them the first 2 in hardcover, which are like kind of hard to find, honestly. Even though like the later books are like always available in hardcover, like these ones were not. And it was because, like my mom had them like as a kid. And then so like when I moved out, I didn't have my own copies, and I've had the last 4 for like quite some time, like since college, and had slowly been over time like finding used versions of like the previous ones. So I was very happy to have finally completed my collection, and now I have all of them in hardcover, and it's very exciting. So this one is more Shannon Hale. And after I read The Princess Academy, she came out with this companion novel series, which is The Goose Girl, Enna Burning, River Secrets, and Forestborn. 4 books there, like companion novels. Forestborn coming out like a little bit later than the other 3. And I have read all of them. And then I went back and got these hardcover copies because these books like were in several iterations, like they had several publishings, and I just like loved the illustrated covers so much more than the ones with like the people on them. There were like more photographs, and so it took me a little while, but I finally found like all 4 of them. So now I have a nice complete collection, which makes me very happy. The first one is a fairy tale retelling about like the story of the Goose Girl, and then from there, the story expands. So while she was like hiding undercover, essentially, she gets adopted into like a family of, like kids that are her age and are like living in like a city that's far from where she grew up. And there are like tensions, like warlike tensions. And so eventually like it becomes like almost like, the story of, kingdoms at war. And each book follows like one character's like perspective, and so they are companion novels as opposed to just like following the same person. But there is a larger plot that's like going on. And in this realm, there are people who are able to speak to nature. So like some can speak to animals, some can speak to the elements, and some can speak to people, meaning like be very persuasive in a way that's like unnatural. And then like the nature speakers are able to like manipulate like the forces of nature like to their benefit. And then the animal speakers like can just speak to animals. I feel like it's probably not as like beneficial as a skill. Okay. And then as I was talking, I realized that there is one more like series I guess I wanted to mention that I did go through and buy. And it was because the author published like a new book in the series, like much after I had finished reading them. So there's one more like collection of books that I read like as a middle schooler that I now own. And it's the Graceling realm books. The first one I don't have currently like on my shelf because I did lend it out to a friend. But it is Graceling by Kristin Cashore. And I do have the other books available. You can see them right there. And they are Fire, Bitter Blue, and Winter Keep. And those are also a companion series. So each of the books like follows a new like main character. And it's, like a similar situation. It's like a bunch of kingdoms. Not all of the characters are from the same kingdom, but all of the kingdoms are like in contact with each other, having some issues. And that one also involves like some time differences as well. So like not all of the books are told sequentially. In that story, there's also some magic involved where every person who is born with like two different colored eyes has what they call like a grace, which can be, like any kind of power that's like separate from the average person essentially. And each of the kingdoms have different approaches to how they deal with people who are born with graces. So it was really good. I really enjoyed like going back and rereading those when the new book came out. And I think she actually like just announced that she's writing like another book in the series about a character from the fourth book. No, a character from the third book. Those were the only ones I really reread out of the list like I just gave you, aside from Goose Girl, which I think I read at the end of last year. So yeah, I mean, it was really fun going through all of these. It's making me like very nostalgic. I hope you learned like a little bit more about me as like a young reader, just like trying to make it through the world. And I feel like maybe in a future time period, I can make a list of like all the books that I read like from this time of my life that I don't own and like that I want to, because I feel like that would be fun too. But yeah, it was fun sharing them with you. And let me know some of the books that like made a difference for you, like in like your middle school years, which would be like, for me, we were in middle school, like 5th to 8th grade. So these are all books that I read like during that time period that stuck out and like I read multiple times. So that's my criteria, I guess. If any of these books were like your personal favorites, let me know as well. I feel like some of them I'm not really sure like how popular they were. Like among other people. I feel like Caddy Woodlawn, like I don't know anyone else who read that like as a kid, who's like my age. I feel like I don't know, with like the Little House on the Prairie books, for example, like those were very popular, and this one was like kind of a less off the beaten path one. I'm excited to hear about all your little reader selves, and I'll see you again soon. All right, bye.